Well, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started right out of the gate. I have noon exactly. We had a great group and discussion on Tuesday, which was good. So I'm sure we're going to have the same today. So I am Bryan Clontz, president of Charitable Solutions. We do these webinars, as you probably know, monthly. We were supposed to do this, I guess, in my head. We were going to do it maybe 3 or 4 months during COVID, and this has got to be close to our 60th one. So it's not one of these people like, oh, you guys have been doing this for, forever. I was like, actually, no. So we just sort of started during COVID and continued using this as an outlet for stuff we're seeing and things that we think are interesting and timely. And that definitely plays right into AI. And so Paul has done a number of these webinars for us in the past. A little quick housekeeping. We will not send out slides per usual, but we will send out the full recording, and as well as the Q&A. So would love to have some Q&A. We have chat disabled. Had a number of great questions on Tuesday, so I expect you guys will hopefully be better today. And so before we get started with the meat, I will take maybe 7 minutes or so to go over the Charitable Solutions overview, all the weird stuff that we do. And so, Paul, if you want to advance slide here too. So our mission since day one, which was January 15th, 2003, so we're coming up on 23 years here pretty soon, was to help make charitable gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't. And we really do this through risk management and aggregation across some strange, even niche and sub-niche areas and activities. Even people within the field like, oh my gosh, do you guys actually do that? It's like, we sure do. So many of which would not be sort of a full business, but once you aggregate these sort of random things, it sort of works out great. We have 28 wonderful team members, including Paul, that specialize in sort of different aspects. So I'll go top right. So Emergency Assistance Fund Administration. I set up a charity 12 years ago now, more than that, 15 years ago, called the Emergency Assistance Foundation. We do grants primarily for corporations to their employees for personal hardships and for disaster, do that globally. This slide, I was talking with Paul right before this started, is about 2 years old maybe. And so here it says we have 350 funds. I think we're at 475 now, so that's going very quickly. We have just under 150 people on the team there. A third are global, and a third of our grants are global. So we do a lot in that space. We do collectively, Paul does a ton of this. I know Caleb does as well. But professional advisor, CE, board, staff, donor, speeches. So do typically about 60 to 80 days out a year. I did a webinar this morning. I'll do another webinar this afternoon. Today is webinar day, evidently. But love doing that. So again, Paul, Ryan on our team, Russ Willis, a lot do these types of speeches, primarily around these areas. So more around the risk management, obviously all plain giving, charitable tax, things like that. Then bottom middle are charitable appraisals. So our tagline has been, if you can give it to charity at any point in time, we can appraise it. So we have 5 appraisers or qualified appraisers for these various types of assets. I have done, I think, literally 30 maybe-ish crypto appraisals in the last 7 days. This weekend is looking horrific because nobody waits until the last minute, except everybody does, for their October 15th tax filing deadline. So I do the crypto appraisals and life insurance. Probably crypto I've done at least 200 so far this year. But more importantly, we have 2 business appraisers, a person that just does tangible personal property, and then a person that does precious metals coins. So anything that generally, other than local real estate, we don't do that, but anything else nationally, we do for obviously lifetime gifts, life income gifts, or estate gifts. And our 2 primary activities, getting back to helping make charitable gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't, are around non-cash assets and charitable gift annuities. So those are the only 2 types of gifts that the charity can actually lose more money than the original gift if things, get wonky or sideways. So that's where we've spent most all of our firm's time. So in charitable gift annuities, we have sort of two lanes, if you will. One is doing direct consulting. So we do actuarial stress testing of existing pools. Usually they're 5 to 10 million or more, and basically provide full reports about basically 10 different dimensions of risk and sort of where risk is, where risk isn't, all of which trying to minimize risk, making sure that each new gift annuity coming in is additive to the surplus of the pool. So basically making sure nothing coming in is going to get anything sideways to maximize the residuals. So we do that on a couple different levels. I've had an actuary on the team since day one. I do a lot of that work as well. And then for very large gifts, typically where there's a concentration of risk, we both do analysis of does reinsurance fit, doesn't fit, if so, at what level is optimal, and then both the design and placement. So we do insurance placement there. That's the only thing I've done for 30 years now in this sort of the insurance field is just CGA reinsurance brokerage. That's sort of it in that sort of sub niche space. For other charities, they may say, we don't want to do gift annuities at all, or we used to do them, we don't want to do them anymore, or we don't want to do them for real estate. We just did our first one last week for crypto, or we're not licensed in a particular state. So for all of those, we use the National Gift Annuity Foundation. So here also, this is about a year and a half, 2 years old, is at 800 contracts. We are now at 1,100, and I think 52 is our current number as of like 2 days ago. So we're doing one a day. And so these are every single one of those were initially offered to a charity that the charity, for all the reasons that I just mentioned, were not comfortable taking it in. So we're not licensed. I got 2 this week from Hawaii. I don't know if we're going to do them. Hawaii is a pain in the butt, but we're in all 50 states already. So rather than having some charity having to say no, which drives me nuts, good donor, good asset, wanting to do good things, don't say no. Give us a call. We'll try to figure out if it can be done. Instead, it can go through the National Gift Annuity Foundation. Key point, 100% of the residuum must be granted out from us to one or multiple charities that the donor was trying to give to in the first place. So we just had maybe a couple months ago, I think it may have been one of Paul's clients, but it was a very large charity, super sophisticated, licensed in the state, very large gift annuity pool, all great, but the donor wanted to give to 4 different charities. The other 2 didn't have gift annuity pools at all. I think one had them, but not in the state that the donor wanted to do it. And so this charity was like, we love the donor, but we're not going to get into the business of, in essence, underwriting gift annuities for other nonprofits who aren't ourselves. What can we do? Oh, wait, there's this weird specialized group that can take in the gift annuity. We are able to take it in. And now we just say, what percentage do you want to go to that originating charity, the one that could have done it themselves? And then what percentage do you want it to go to the other ones? And everybody was happy. Same kind of thing with non-cash. So non-cash is about half of our work. You can see here we have about 4 billion completed. We're about 5.5 billion now. So again, this was about 2 years ago. We're doing roughly $1 billion a year. We've already done 750 million in non-cash gifts this year. These are all outright gifts. I'll talk about that very briefly on the next slide. But the point is they average usually about 4.5 to 5 million. You can see their average fee is about 1.2 to 1.4%. 100% of all the work that we do are for nonprofits behind them that are working with their donors, that they're not able to do something with them directly. Capacity issue, sophistication issue, legal tax risk issue, or really timing. So we could do this all day, but not by Monday. So they'd give us that call. So we run this through our National Donor Advised Fund. We have a corporate form DAF, a trust form DAF for UBIT mitigation, for S Corp, things like that. And then we also have, I think it's 26 single member LLCs underneath those from a structural risk containment component, again, around aggregation. So that's basically it. So one other quick slide, and then we're going to pass it over. So this was in 2024. Again, does not include our CRT activity. I should have mentioned that on the last slide. So Paul leads that area, or CGA activity. So these are just non-cash outright gifts, all of which, again, after that 1.2 to 1.3% fee on average, 30 days after the sale, are granted right back to the charity based on donor advised fund recommendation and best practices and so on. So quickly, here's about 288. So that's more than 1 per day. You can see there's 641 million. I just mentioned we've already taken in more by number and over 100 million more in value through the first 9 months of the year. So it's crazy, the activity. We typically do our half of our year in the last 90 days, like many of you. So if that happens, that'd be 1.2, 1.4 billion or so of these non-cash assets in 1 year, all of which were initially declined, referred over. We were able to capture them, hold back that fee at the time of liquidation, and then we make the grant out. I'm not going to go through all the detail. We're doing more real estate than any other charity nationally. This understates it because there's a lot of real estate inside those LLCs. Do a ton of S corps, also very understated because a lot of LLCs elect to be taxed as S. So legally they're LLCs, tax they're an S corp. So those would sort of flop over too, and a ton of cryptocurrency. Last 6 or 7 years, I've been saying it's 1%, 2%, 1%. Here, obviously, it was whatever that is, 25% or more of ish for the overall contributions last year. We just did our largest one ever on Friday of last week for 24 million of a Bitcoin donation. So we'll be way, way, way over 100 million for this year too. So when you have a donor give you a call and they have some kind of complicated question, right now you may be sort of trying to sort of cobble that together yourselves. But the point of this whole webinar is around how to use AI, and more specifically, Paul's Gift Planning Workstation, Frank, and Max to help service those donors in the best way possible. So I'll turn it over to Paul. He's been with us, I think, what, 6 years now? Ish, 5.
Something like that. I'm
Yeah.
having so much fun, I've lost track.
There you go. Me too. Me
But-
too. And we've got a special guest, Caleb, who I know Paul will introduce as well. So with that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bryan. And thank you for all being here with us today. We're excited. This is our 3rd webinar on artificial intelligence. We did one in 23. We did one last year, and we're doing one this year. Now, if you'd like to go back and watch those sessions, there are some nuggets of information that we're not going to go through today. So for instance, we went over a lot of AI terminology, what is a GPT, what is a large language model, what is natural language processing. We're not going to do that today, but you're welcome to go back and review those webinars in the archives. Caleb, thank you for being with us today as a special guest. I'll introduce you here in a few slides, but I wanted to start out with just a quick update on the AI landscape and its relevance. So when we talk about AI today, almost head now into 2026, it's important to understand the bigger picture that we're no longer in this novelty stage of AI. You all probably had your Chat GPT 3 moment in November of 2022. So we're 3 years, past this novelty of the use of generative AI. And a recent survey of knowledge workers shows that of teams now, about half of the team members are using AI daily as part of their workflow. But here's the key. While the adoption is getting pretty broad, although there are other countries that have adopted AI even more so than the US, it's still pretty shallow. Many knowledge workers are using AI for writing notes or simply for some basic content creation like writing an email. So what we're learning is that AI isn't just this occasional helper anymore. For many team members, it's really embedded into their day-to-day work. But the way that it's being used tells a bigger story. It's again being used to write emails, write letters, and what we'd like to share with you today are some ways that you can kind of go beyond words, which is the title of our presentation. And what I mean is that generative AI wowed us in what it could write, but just writing is the beginning for today's technology, and it's going to continue to evolve and become stronger. But it can already conduct very accurate research on complex tax and legal questions, which we will give you some demos today. It could run some calculations and generate illustrations for donors very quickly. And it can interpret documents. So if you upload documents like a will or a revocable living trust, it can help you interpret them very quickly. And why this matters is that, we're working, as you'll see today, in a closed, specialized AI system, because accuracy, compliance, information security, and the integrity of that are all essential, not only in our field, but in every field. And it's not enough to be fast, but it really has to be right. A couple more slides that I wanted to share with this audience. I was listening to a YouTube video of John Gray, who's the Chief Investment Officer of Blackstone, big private equity firm. And this slide shows how productivity and the stock market surged after the World Wide Web went public in 1993 and Netscape rolled out in 1994. But the productivity didn't grow so quickly just simply because employees now could surf the web. The real productivity gains came during that time when organizations really re-engineered themselves around digital technology. Think about supply chains in the 1970s and 80s. Companies had these huge warehouses of inventory. And by the late 90s, with enterprise software, internet-enabled logistics, companies like Walmart pioneered this just-in-time inventory, cutting cost and dramatically, producing, more productivity while serving more customers. Online banking was one of the first utilities that I remember of the internet in the mid to late 90s. And really this restructured the entire workflow, and it really restructured how we work as employees. Our jobs evolved around the internet, and our jobs are now beginning just very subtly to evolve around artificial intelligence. And just like the late 90s, we may see a decade-long lift in productivity, and along with it, really profound changes to how value is created across the economy. I want to pause here, though, and share a cautionary tale that because, with every new wave of technology, there are winners and losers. Those of us that remember the dot-com bubble certainly are aware of this, but this chart shows the value of a New York City taxi medallions over time. And for decades, owning a medallion was one of the no-brainer, safest investments that you could make. Prices you see a 10% annual rate of return. And for many investors, this was a no-brainer investment. And then almost overnight, going back about 15 years ago, things changed dramatically with the rise of ride-sharing platforms like Uber and Lyft, and the value of those medallions collapsed, dropping by more than 80%. And the lesson here isn't about taxis, it's about disruption. If we dismiss AI as a flash in the pan, or we wait too long to adapt, we risk being caught on the wrong side of change. Just as the ride sharing reshaped transportation, AI is shaping the way all of us do business. And what's very ironic is that, it took, many, many years for the the traditional taxi medallion to get disrupted. And now within 15 years, Uber and Lyft have to, they are concerned about disruption with autonomous driving. Their Waymo is now in 6 different cities. They're working on, getting into New York City. And of course, Tesla has launched their autonomous driving as well. And speaking of Waymo, which is owned by Google, here's kind of an opposite side of the story. So if you look at Google, they're not just sitting around waiting for disruption to come to them. Search is the backbone of their business model. And if AI changes the way people search for information, that threatens Google at its core. So instead of ignoring the shift, they're leaning into it. So you can see here on the right-hand side that AI mode is built right into the search bar. And this tells us a couple things. Number one, even the best, most entrenched players in AI realize that it is way too important to ignore. Google bought a company called DeepMind 10, 12 years ago already to make sure that it was prepared for this new quantum leap in technology. And the other thing is that the best organizations don't wait until disruption hits them. So they're planning ahead of time. And so in many respects, there's a lot that we can learn from Google and their adoption to this new technology rather than dismissing it. So now I just want to briefly introduce the tools, agents, Frank and Max, that we use at Plan Giving Interactive and Charitable Solutions. And I'll talk just very briefly about Frank and Max, because we're going to get into much more detail with them when we talk about the use of Max and Frank for both advisor and donor education. But we'll start with a little bit more detail with Frank, because Frank is our agent that operates inside the Gift Planners Workstation, which is a tool that Caleb's been using now for about 3 years. And so Frank is trained to be the Gift Planner's Gift Planner. So when you are prompting Frank for information, He's going to answer it much, much more fact-based, citing the Internal Revenue Code and the other content that we've built the workstation on. And Max is going to be more of a donor education tool where she's going to be able to answer questions and provide information in more plain English. And so we'll get into much more detail with that shortly. And I wanted to share with you that, transparency is really the key for how we have built these tools, Frank and Max. Before the plan giving industry races to adopt AI solutions, I think it's critical to establish a standard for responsible and transparent AI. And with Charitable Solutions and Plan Giving Interactive, we're committed to creating AI tools that are not only powerful, but trustworthy and clearly sourced. So you can see here, you can go right to our website, stategiftplanning.com, and you'll see the same pyramid. This is the only information that Frank and Max are trained on. So at the very bottom, obviously the Internal Revenue Code, the Treasury regs, many private letter rulings, not all of them, but a lot of revenue and private letter rulings that pertain to charitable planning, of course. All of the content that I've been writing for many, many years now in the Gift Planners Workstation, which Caleb and I will talk about here momentarily. You can see Bryan Clontz and Ryan Raffin's book on non-cash assets, which is a critical staple for all of this, and on and on. And very excited about the reboot of the Journal of Gift Planning by CGP. That's been spearheaded by Bryan, who is leading the editorial reviews of these new issues, and very excited that CGP is rolling that back out again. And that content will also, the appropriate content from those journals will be added to the Gift Planners Workstation, and therefore added to the data set for Frank and Max as well. So Caleb, you are an estate planning attorney by background, and now you've been a gift planner for what, about 3 years?
Yeah, almost 3 years, yeah.
Okay, great. And while I'm interviewing you, you didn't know you were probably going to be interviewed, but while I'm interviewing you here, I'm going to, in the background, instead of kind of switching back and forth screens and going to the workstation, we recorded some videos of these interactions. And this first one here is the user is asking Frank to describe the difference between a CRT and a CLT. But Caleb, let's get back to you. You've been an estate planning attorney. You've been a gift planner for how long?
Almost 3 years.
3 years. And you've been a workstation user for pretty much the majority of that time. As a tax attorney who's been trained, not too long ago, in the black arts of tax law research, how have you used the workstation to help you perform, now as a gift planner?
Yeah, I think coming from the world of practicing as an attorney, I was accustomed to using things like Westlaw and LexisNexis to do legal research, and there's not really a good analog in the gift planning world. And those types of products don't really fit what I'm looking for anyway. So for me, especially as a new gift planner, I would use it, and I still use it pretty often for before I go into a meeting. Um, you know, Give me a list of questions to ask about gift of S corporations. What types of things do I need to be looking out for with a gift of commercial real estate? And it's really, really good at giving me all the points of here are the potential problems you're facing, here are the potential tax considerations, UBIT concerns, things like that, while also just giving me the citations to the parts of the code and the parts of the reg that I'm used to and that I want to see to make sure that I'm really doing my due diligence. That's probably the thing that I use it most often for, is just kind of a backup of, hey, what do I need to look out for? What do I need to ask about when I'm talking to this donor in about an hour? Um, and then the other thing that I've found it really, really useful for is complex question, just making sure that you're even identifying all of the issues. So, for instance, we were the beneficiaries of a charitable lead annuity trust, so we were receiving payments. and we were looking into, what are the possibilities of selling our annuity interest to a third party. And just by running that question through Frank, it actually identified an issue that we were somewhat familiar with, but it's actually, there's not really any case law, there's not any private letter rulings, there's nothing out there really written about it. But it brought it up as an issue and gave us a source for where it was coming up with that issue, and it led us in a completely different direction, probably, saved a few relationships in the process. So it's really good as kind of a fact checker on your own knowledge in your head. And I'm very much into, you need to learn the stuff, you need to know your stuff, but this is very good at making sure that you remember all of the stuff that you learned, or pointing out issues that you've missed.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had kind of jotted down a note that I was going to ask you here, especially as a tax attorney. And before I do that, I want to introduce this next prompt that a user put into Frank. And I wanted to share with the audience that I personally don't have access to anyone that is prompting either Max or Frank, because Frank for Advisors and Max, who we'll talk about shortly, live on a lot of different websites now that charities have them as a widget. And so I have no idea, who are putting in these prompts, but I do have access to the actual discussion with the AI agent itself. And we got a kick out of this one, I think, the other day, Caleb. It's hard to read, I know, for you out there, but basically, this user, I don't know who AN is, but he says that we have an initial discovery meeting with a professional athlete with a big contract. Want to gently introduce a grantor CLT option at the end of the conversation. What are some of the advantages, benefits, and opportunities that you can direct or support this conversation without getting into the technical weeds? And so do you ever just kind of throw something out there like that, Caleb, and just see what comes back when you're thinking about, like, would a potential, tool like a grantor lead trust or a CRT or whatever, do you ever just put it out there and then see what you get back?
Yeah, actually, the first time that I really dug into using Frank was actually a situation with a grantor lead trust, and it was an incredibly complicated situation. And we were talking about basically trying to have a note owned by a blocker corporation and receive the payments from the note, and all of these different things going on. And that that was when it was like, okay, let's just explain the situation and try to actually figure out what are all of the options, what are the things that, what are the alternatives, maybe what are some other ideas that would fit this fact scenario. And it was really, really good at just distilling of why, you can go down this road, here's a PLR, but you could also go down this other road that is far less complicated and accomplishes the same thing. So I do like it for spitballing. I do think you have to be, the better your inputs are, the better your output's going to end up being. I think the more information you can give it, the better it's going to be at identifying alternatives to what you're asking about. But yeah, I definitely use it for that as well.
And Ronald Reagan once said, trust but verify. And is that kind of your thought around artificial intelligence in general? Not just your use of the workstation, but just it's going to help you get some information in your hands quick, which is good. But then you don't just trust that entirely. Like, you still do your own homework above and beyond that.
Yeah, and I think this is, again, for me, it's very much, if I'm putting it out there in the world or I'm relying on it, I want to make sure that everything's buttoned up and everything is correct. And I do have that background in tax, so I may have a little bit more of a background in it than some development officers or gift planners even. But at the end of the day, Frank is a really good tool because it's going to cite where it's getting the information from, and so you can just go straight to the source and continue reading about it. And I think quite often I use it for that as well, of, okay, I'm tugging on this thread of this issue, And the way that I continue learning about this field and things related to tax is to just continue along the thread until there's nothing left. And Frank continues to give me more and more and more of that thread to pull on until I've reached a logical conclusion of that question. Back to the original, selling an interest, charity selling an interest in a CLAT. We tugged on that thread and it went all the way to, intermediate sanctions for public charity foundation board members. So that's a whole area of law that I did not ask it about, that I ended up learning a ton about just by continuing down the line of, okay, well, what type of issues does that present if we do this now? And I think continuing to learn is one of the things that gift planners that can provide to their institutions, being up to date on things, but also just having the ability to issue spot in the moment. And I think Frank can continue to allow you to broaden your knowledge base basically just by pulling on those threads.
And it's so interesting. I mean, you're trained as a tax attorney and you wouldn't need a tool like this, but what it does is it helps you just be much more productive and save time. Whereas, I don't have an LLM in taxation. And so, and many plan giving specialists, even if they went to law school, they may not have an LLM in taxation. And that's a huge distinction. And so for the rest of us, what this does is it's even more than that. It doesn't put us on the same level playing field. So that year that you spent, you didn't waste that getting your LLM. But it doesn't level the playing field, but it gets us to a level where we can really understand whether a gift is going to have a good outcome or a not so good outcome, right?
Yep.
And I'll just, if those of the audience that were watching the scrolling here were wondering how long this was going to last, but this was truly the interaction that this user must have been like a financial advisor or an attorney had with Frank. And one of the things that you could see that separates Frank from just using, ChatGPT or Gemini or anything is that when Frank responds to a question, he sometimes it can be too annoying actually, but he'll ask, do you want this as well? And if you keep saying yes, you're just going to keep going and keep getting, more and more information. So for those of you watching, you could see that, where the conversation started with just explain a grantor CLAT, it got to the point where Frank was actually running calculations on what it would take to potentially zero out that CLAT, using some basic assumptions. We'll talk more about calculators here in a moment, but I thought the last response that the user gave was kind of funny, Caleb, that it doesn't need a chart, but he thinks that rates are going down, so that may help the case for the CLAT, right? But he says that the athlete may need this before the end of the year because the Panthers won the national championship. So that must have been somebody in South Florida is my guess.
Yeah, I said the other day it was Eastern Illinois, but I don't know the last time that they won a national championship. They didn't win with Tony Romo, so I don't think it ever happened.
I think you're right. It would have been a very long time ago. This is just a screenshot of the Gift Planners Workstation, and you'll have information at the end of our session today if you'd like to try a 7-day trial for free just to kick the tires in the workstation. And then, of course, we'll talk about our partnership with CGP and the discount that CGP members get as well. But you can see just a few other things. Obviously, Frank is the centerpiece now of the workstation. It's so easy to go in and utilize Frank for so many things, which we'll talk about shortly. But there are some older technologies, I guess I'll describe it that way, that are still embedded in the workstation. So on the top left-hand side, you've got drafting tools. That may not be of interest to a lot of our workstation users. Some of them do use it. I personally use it a lot because you can literally draft any variation of CRT in there. It may not be 100%, but it may get you like 98% of the way there in drafting a very complicated CRT. So for those of us who serve as trustee of CRTs, that's extremely helpful. And I can draft that and then have our attorneys or the donor's attorneys review those. We'll get to calculators and customized concepts here in a moment, but you can, rather than just use Frank, you can actually just use the research tool the old-fashioned way. And Caleb, you use it sometimes just to go in and read articles, do you not?
Yeah, I often start with Frank, but I very, very often end up getting into the research and the, old school kind of nitty-gritty research of just going, gift by asset type and figuring out what it is that I was, reading a snippet of Frank and what it was citing, and then continuing to find, okay, well, what are all the other things, or what are the offshoots of this? Funding a CRT with real estate. What else do I need to know? Maybe there's debt involved. That's a different page than this main real estate page for funding a CRT. So there's all kinds of different things that I try to look at and continue to read the longer form, rather than just the response that Frank gives me. And again, my background is as an attorney. I actually have the Internal Revenue Code sitting on my desk right now. I do like the old school feel of books, and the research tab there kind of gives you the old school feel of books while also keeping it really separated out, where each web page is its own section of essentially a treatise. And it really keeps it clear and helps you organize what you're actually looking at versus, other pages and how it relates to each other. So I use that a lot. I would say close to as much as I use Frank, but I usually start with Frank and end up in the research part.
Yeah, and one other thing I will add to that is that when you go to the research library here, there's 23 chapters. I've spent a good part of my career writing and editing and having others edit the content that you can find in there. But if you go back to that pyramid, if you go to our website, you'll see that Frank is actually trained on the workstation, but you'll know that that's just part of the overall pyramid. The entire Frank's trained on also the entire Internal Revenue Code and the regs. And I was saying this the other day to Caleb that really AI, AI is a perfect solution for the Internal Revenue Code, especially for us laypersons, because as AI continues to get stronger, for many of you that have tried to interpret the Internal Revenue Code but haven't been trained like Caleb has, it's very difficult. So you may be in 170 of the Internal Revenue Code, 170B, and it'll say something, like for organizations described in 509A, there's a 30%, AGI limitation or something like that. And you say, oh my God, now I got to go over to 509, 509A and read that to come back to what I'm reading here. And so the hope is that AI links those things together in its responses, but the treaties that go on top, that are built on top of the Internal Revenue Code, matter significantly. So like Bryan and Ryan's book, the information in the workstation, Dr. Russell James' information and visual plan giving, all that information really just kind of adds a great supplemental touch when you're using Frank for research. So let's talk about mastering prompts now. And you could use these prompts in other LLMs, but I'd like to believe that they can be, the most effective in a closed environment, like Frank. So many of you prompt ChatGPT all the time, and you ask it questions. And as many of you know, the response that you get is only going to be as good as the prompt that you engineer. So what we've been doing in this customized concept section and the calculator section of the workstation is we've been just building a lot of these engineered prompts so that you as the user, it's still a little bit manual, but it's extremely effective. But basically what you as the user do is that you copy this entire prompt and then you paste it into the workstation. And all you got to do is put in the two variables that you see underlined here in the red. So everything else is done for you. So this is a follow-up letter to a donor. And Caleb knows this, that I used to run a gift planning program that was pretty robust. And I would harp on everybody, the gift planners and myself, of the value and the importance after you've had a good donor meeting and you've really had a significant discussion about, their assets and what kind of gift they might be interested in, to follow up with a personalized letter. Now, prior to 2023, 22, that was a very manual thing to do. I would block out an hour of my time just to write that effective letter. I can now do it probably in about 5 minutes. It may take about a minute for Frank to produce the letter, and maybe another 4 minutes for me to trust and verify, right? I'm the human in the loop here. I'm going to go in and I'm going to review the letter that Frank wrote, make sure that it says everything I need it to say, and following up with this donor, and you're off to the races. That level of personalization you couldn't do, but 3 or 4 years ago, that you can now effectively do today and really give you a big bump in your productivity.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing, Paul, that I didn't get to say the other day. To kind of see like the whole process, we had a dentist who wanted to give us the dental practice in exchange for a CGA. The dental practice was taxed as an S corp, so all kinds of like technical issues. So I start with Frank. I go through, I research, I do everything that we just talked about before. Then I have, a template letter that I kind of like to use, for a few of the paragraphs. I then type up what I think is a decent explanation of, dental practice for CGA, and it wasn't really what I was wanting. So I go to Frank and I say, hey, draft this letter, doing everything that you just mentioned, and it gives me a paragraph that I was. It gives me a perfect summary of what I was looking for, that explained it in a way that, number one, if her advisor is looking at it, it's going to work really well for them. But number two, she could understand. And both of those points are really important. And just kind of like to kind of harmonize how I've used all of these tools together. That's like a really technical example, but a really real world example of, hey, I want a life income gift when I sell my practice.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And the other day we talked too about how, gift planners used to contact you when you were an estate planning attorney, and, how this is a great time for a gift planner to make a good impression on the client's, on the donor's attorney, on their financial advisor or their accountant. And so this prompt on this page here, this is a technical response letter specifically to the donor's advisor. So, it could very well be that, if this is not unusual where you're talking to a donor and the situation maybe is complicated, it's a CRT and, it's funded with a non-cash asset. Hey, just talk to my donor, or, put this in writing to my donor. Oh my gosh, that's going to take me 2 hours. No, it doesn't have to. If you go over, you cut and paste this into Frank. Again, all you got to do is put in 2 variables for these types of prompts to give you a pretty solid output. The asset type and what's the giving method. And that's it. And then, when you get the first response, then you can refine it any way that you want there. So let's talk about calculators. So that was for letter writing, and there are a number of modules in the prompt library that we already have there, and I've had it on my list for a few weeks now to start thinking about more prompts there, but we will get to it. And so we've just really scratched the surface on what the capabilities are with prompt engineering, where it's just, we could think of so many different scenarios where you as a gift planner or advisor, you go in there, you could find that scenario, you cut and paste it into the tool, and you've got most of your work done. Now, the Workstation still has what I call older versions of calculators. And so what you see here is kind of an earlier generation of online calculators. And back in 2022, we didn't really have much with AI yet. And so when Bob Sharp Jr. passed away, who was somebody I really looked up to in the industry, and he had coined the phrase virtual endowment, which is the ultimate blended gift strategy out there for donors. I said to myself, I want to create a virtual endowment calculator in the workstation. And you can see up on the top left-hand side there, it's very rules-based. So you have to put in the information correctly, to make sure that you get the right output. And that's how, of course, all online calculators work, as all of you know out there. And these are still effective, and I still have them in the workstation. But eventually, I will be updating these for reasons that I will share with you momentarily here. So we're starting to build a library of calculators in the workstation, and we're doing it now in a new way, which is engaging with Frank instead of creating kind of the older version of an online calculator. And it's very simple. You can basically, again, take this prompt that you see here, and you can paste it into Frank. Now, this is more than 2 variables that you have to put in, but you can see that that there's not that many variables that you have to do. So you copy that, you tap on Frank in the bottom right-hand corner, and then you've got these variables that you put in. So you could put in the full name, or you could put in, maybe just, if you're more comfortable with it, you could put in the last name, just the first initial. Although I think, if I haven't said this already, we have trained our content with a very constrained data set, and anything that you put into Frank, it is not training itself on that content. That is very different than an open system like ChatGPT or Gemini, is that whatever you put in there, it's training itself on. So for privacy issues, you do not ever want to put specific information about donors in an open system. In a closed system, it's okay. But if you want to be even, on the safe side, just put in the donor's initials, to protect their anonymity. But you can see here that what Frank produces essentially here is, it confirms what the input is. This is a calculator for qualified charitable distribution to help show the donor what the true cost is, or in other words, what the tax savings is for a qualified charitable distribution. And the thing that I like about it is it'll compare, the tax benefits of making a QCD versus not doing one at all. But it'll also give you some insights at the very end of it. So it goes beyond that. So it gives you a little bit more to think about. Here's another calculator. This one is actually more rarely used, but I put this up here just to give you an idea of the types of calculators that we're putting on the workstation that will produce illustrations that you can use with your donors. This one is the cost of a non-cash gift and what are the tax benefits, but based on the donor's cost basis. So using basis, not the fair market value. So you say to yourself, why would this ever be valuable? A couple reasons come to mind. One is that you could have a client or a donor that's donating a collection of maybe art for an unrelated use. And so for many of you, you know that if the organization does not have a related use for the tangible property, the deduction is the lesser of the basis or fair market value. So that's one way that you could use this calculator. And then the other is that sometimes you'll have a donor that will donate an appreciated asset that is either a short-term gain still, or it is a long-term gain, but there's not that much delta between the basis and the fair market value. And so it may be beneficial for the donor instead of using the fair market value as their deduction, to simply use the basis, because instead of then having the 30% AGI limitation, you have the 50% AGI limitation. So, but the other calculator that would be more commonly used here that's very similar is the cost of a donation of a non-cash asset using the fair market value, because in most cases, it's probably, very highly appreciated, like real estate or a closely held business, and you're going to be much better off using the fair market value. Caleb, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I just made all my calculators with spreadsheets for nothing is basically what I took from that. So
Well, very, very few of us are skilled at the level of Excel that you are to begin with. But I would say, hey, those aren't for a loss. You can still create spreadsheets, for anything that you might be interested in that personalized for your donor. But I do think that we're going to get to a level, if we haven't already, where you can pretty much run any type of calculation in a tool like the Workstation. However, I want to make a very important point to our friends at PG Calc and Crescendo. I have a lot of respect for both of those companies. They've been in business for 40 years, and our calculators are purely to supplement the use of PG Calc and Crescendo. And one of the reasons I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to put calculators into the Workstation to create donor illustrations was not to compete with split interest gifts. Crescendo, PG Calc, that's purely what they're for. And ironically, if you ask most gift planning specialists out there, what software do you use? If they're not using the Workstation, they're probably going to respond saying PG Calc or Crescendo. And PG Calc and Crescendo are brilliant tools that are specifically for split interest gifts, which, by the way, represent about 10% of planned gifts. And that's for a robust planned giving program. So CRTs, pooled income funds, CGAs, retained life estates, use PG Calc and Crescendo. For tools like, I just want to show a donor the value of making a QCD and the tax savings from that. Or I want to show the donor what their tax savings is for giving appreciated stock to my organization. That's what we're trying to accomplish here in the calculation section of the Workstation. And then the last thing that I'll leave you all with today is that there are two different versions of Frank. There is Frank that lives in the Workstation, and that's more of a robust Frank. You can upload documents to Frank, and he can interpret those, and you're going to get citations that, as Caleb mentioned earlier, that then you can click on those and you can read the full citation. But there's also a tool called Frank for Advisors. And Frank for Advisors is a simple widget that can live on any website, on your Plan Giving website or wherever. And it's really for professional advisor relations. So if you have a page for advisors, which every charity should, it's where you want to put like your sample bequest language and other forms and things like that. To have Frank live there, what we're finding is for the charities that have already adopted that, it's driving a lot more activity to their Plan Giving website, because these advisors now in the back of their mind remember that this website has more utility than just some basic static information. I can go there now and do some research on estate planning or charitable planning with Frank. And the first adopters of this have been community foundations, because as many of you in the audience know, community foundations derive 85% of their new donor relationships from professional advisors. So that tie to the local advisor relationship is critical, but it can be critical for really any charity. And so Frank for Advisors is also a separate widget that can live on a Plan Giving website. We can send you samples of those. And then there's also Max, which we mentioned at the very beginning. And as I mentioned to you, the purpose of Max here is really for donor education purposes. Now, I go back long enough, and I know that there's some people that probably have a concern about having an agent on their site where a donor can ask questions about estate planning and maybe financial planning or charitable planning. And I just want to point out a few things. I've been around long enough now where I remember when there were people that were reluctant just to have a Plan Giving website. And you could see where, in the past, people had concerns, and the thinking there was more of a fixed mindset than a growth mindset. And it was, if we have a website and the donors are going to get educated on these planned gift vehicles, then they're not going to call me. And what we found is that, that kind of thinking is primitive, right? That your website has probably been one of the reasons over the last 2 decades that donors have been able to get better educated. And then when they do reach out to you, maybe they've already read an article on your plan giving website. And what you'll find, of course, if I don't care how expensive or fancy of a website that you have, or if you've used a vendor for it, when you get to the bottom line of the donor education piece, it's still going to be very high level. It may describe the difference between CRTs and CRTs, right? And that's pretty much where it stops. But your donor wants to personalize it. And what Max does is it gives you an opportunity to personalize the types of questions that you can ask. Where does a CRT apply to me and my situation? And that's really the excitement of what Max can bring. And it's really starting to drive more and more traffic to plan giving websites, because now donors have this kind of interactive widget that they can ask personalized questions to. And as we develop Max, what I think the industry is going to find is this is going to be a powerful lead generation tool. Not only is it not a competition to you, it's your friend. It's a lead generation tool that will help donors reach out to you faster. And you can see here one thing that Max does that you'll never see ChatGPT do is as it's interacting with the donor, it says, for more personalized guidance, I recommend reaching out to the plan giving specialist at the organization that you're interested in supporting. And we're going to be able to produce that type of lead generation even more customized as more charities start to use the enterprise version of Max that can be trained on more of the organization's information. So it'll be almost like Max is trained just to be a spokesperson for your organization. So we're very excited about what that could look like in the years going forward. So this hour flew by again, Caleb, and I really want to thank you for just taking time out of your busy day, twice this week to go through this with us. Bryan, I want to thank you for also just being willing to get this out there. This is our third webinar now on artificial intelligence, and it keeps getting more and more. I keep getting more and more excited about what we're able to showcase the industry, with what we're developing. So, and I'm excited for more of this. For those of you who are interested in learning more, you could reach out to us at estategiftplanning.com. I would encourage you to stop by our booths, plural, next week. We have a big charitable solutions booth next week that's an NCAP in Indy. And come over, stop by for a demo, talk to us about what the good things that we do at Charitable Solutions and these tools at Plan Giving Interactive. You can see that here's our pricing structure for the Workstation on the left side, and then Max and Frank for advisors on the right-hand side. And then for those of you who are CGP members, you just type in that coupon code and you get 25% off. So you can see ultimately what the pricing is there. So Bryan, again, thank you for this. And if we got a couple minutes for questions, happy to do so.
Well, we do. No questions have come in. You did a great job, you and Caleb, with a sort of short amount of time to cover a lot of turf. Just would really encourage people too. You can see that there's a 7-day free trial on some of these tools. There's ways for being able to sort of bundle some of these, which sort of Paul has not sort of had a lot of opportunity to go through, but to be able to use a couple of these just to sort of see how you can use it in your daily work, obviously with clients, with donors. And maybe most importantly, sort of this discount for CGP. So this will be, I think technically already is a member benefit option. And then so we're sharing some of the revenue back with CGP as sort of part of that much broader relationship. So well, it looks like we did have a question come in. Very good. So $374 one time or annually?
Annually. As long as you're a CGP member, then you get that discount.
Yeah, it's about $30 a month or so. But thank you for that question. If there are any other ones, definitely we can take those as they come up. But just so appreciate it. I know we're getting here right to the end of the hour. Your time, Paul, on putting this together. And it's just been, as you said, is this our third AI webinar? I think
Our third one.
Yeah. So just where the broader tools have come from, the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 in very, very quick succession. And you and I obviously have been talking about what the next version looks like as well. So just continuing to make improvements to this. But we use it if you go on to our our National Gift Annuity Foundation website. We have Max as a widget sort of embedded in there. We're able to sort of have donors go right there and sort of do some preliminary research on their own, which I think they really, really like doing. But we're users, we love it, and we hope this is helpful to you, at least seeing what AI is doing more broadly for charitable planning, but obviously these tools more specifically. Also, Paul's doing an AI talk at CGP next week too, with 2 other sort of national AI thought leaders. But as you said, we'll be at the booth. Any questions you have between now and then, feel free to just reach out to us. So hope everybody appreciated the time and the information. Here's sort of the past webinars we've done. We have a whole YouTube channel now with all of these sort of baked in there, again, all free. So any education, hopefully, that you can get there, including our free book on the non-cash assets as a download. So with that, thank everybody. I think we're right at the top of the hour. Paul, Caleb, thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.